In the heart of the 19th century, when Europe wrestled between Victorian morality and the shadows of desire, the Bavarian painter Franz von Stuck raised a dark mirror before the collective conscience of his time. In 1893, he presented the world with a painting that would not only catapult him to fame, but would forever mark the imagination of European symbolism, the Sinn, in German, Die Sünde. The work is, at first glance, a simple portrait. A half-nude woman, with pale skin and a veiled gaze, emerges from an absolute black background, while a bluish-scaled snake coils around her body with threatening calm. However, just a few seconds of contemplation are enough to feel that something deeper beats in that penumbra. The eternal tension between desire and guilt, between flesh and spirit, between fascination and fear. It is not an image that is looked at, it is an image that looks at us. And that inversion of visual power was from the very first moment its true scandal. Franz von Stuck was born in 1863 in Tettenweis, Bavaria, and grew up in a time when German art sought to free itself from rigid academicism to explore the psychological, the erotic, and the symbolic. The son of peasants, self-taught and ambitious, Stuck understood that art should not only paint the visible world, but the invisible impulses that move it. He was one of the founders of the Munich Secession in 1892, a movement that proclaimed the artist's independence from institutional norms. In that context of aesthetic and spiritual rebellion, the Sinn became his visual manifesto. It was not simply a painting about temptation, it was a declaration of power, the power of the image to dominate the viewer with the same force with which sin dominates human will. The canvas measures just under 1 meter in height and is constructed with the precision of a religious icon. The background is a black abyss, without depth or horizon, that absorbs all light. In the middle of that darkness, the female body seems to float, illuminated by a greenish-blue glow that recalls the sheen of flesh under the moon. Her face is half hidden by shadow, her eyes barely visible, her mouth closed with an expression that is neither innocence nor provocation, but mystery. Around her neck and chest coils a gigantic serpent, whose head rests near the left shoulder and looks at the viewer with reptilian coldness. The contrast between the woman's pale skin and the dark gleam of the reptile creates a tension that is almost physical. The serpent's gaze and the shadow covering the human face fuse both presences into a single entity, the woman and temptation, beauty and danger, the body and the poison. The golden frame, designed by Stuck himself, is an extension of the painting, not an ornament. It is built with Doric half-columns and bears in capital letters the title Die Sünde. The frame does not frame, it preaches. It makes the painting an altar, and the viewer an involuntary believer. Everything in the composition is designed to provoke an experience of contemplation and reverence, as if sin were a new religion, and the woman its silent goddess. In the upper corner of the canvas, a small orange band breaks the blackness. There Stuck signs his name, as if inscribing his authorship within the eternal fire of desire. That warm light, suspended over the cold flesh, acts as a metaphor for condemnation. The fire of hell burns above the flesh that has tasted the forbidden fruit. The model for the painting was, according to most historians, Anna Maria Brandmeier, a woman Stuck met in his youth, and with whom he maintained a passionate relationship. However, in the painting she ceases to be an individual and becomes a symbol. She is Eve, and she is Lilith, the mother of desire and the bearer of punishment. Her body, almost inhuman in its marble perfection, does not convey vulnerability but power. She is not a victim of sin, she is its incarnation. The serpent does not oppress her, it adorns her. There is no fear in her posture but control. That ambiguity is the essence of the painting. We do not know whether we are witnessing the fall or the triumph, whether the woman is damned or whether she dominates the beast that surrounds her. Stuck conceived several versions of the scene, all slightly different in tone, frame, and color. The first, created in 1893, belongs to the Neue Pinakothek in Munich, where it is still preserved. Other versions are found in Berlin, Palermo, Seattle, and in Villa Stuck itself, the palace residence the artist built in Munich to turn his life into a total work of art. In each of them, the artist repeated the motif like a personal rite, adjusting luminous nuances and variations in the frame. Some present a greener glow, others a more reddish fire, but all preserve the same unsettling silence. In Villa Stuck, the painting was placed in what the artist called the altar of the sinner, a ceremonial space where the work was displayed as if it were a religious icon. There, under dim light, the visitor did not contemplate sin, they venerated it. When the work was first presented at the Munich Secession exhibition, the public was divided between fascination and scandal. Critics from conservative sectors labeled it immoral, while young artists considered it a revelation. There was no official censorship, but there was a constant murmur. The painting provoked too much desire for a time that still clung to bourgeois morality. In 1899, the Sin was awarded the gold medal in Vienna, consolidating Stuck as one of the great masters of symbolism. From then on, his name became associated with the modern myth of the femme fatale, that figure who devours and seduces, who destroys and redeems. In symbolic terms, the work is a visual treatise on the duality of the human soul. The woman is the embodiment of desire, but also of the punishment that desire implies. The serpent does not represent external evil, but the inner voice that invites transgression. By encircling the female body, the serpent becomes an extension of her own will, a metaphor for the pleasure that devours, and at the same time gives meaning to existence. The black background is not only the absence of light, but a moral void, the space where conscience confronts its own shadow. In that timeless, placeless setting, Stuck sums up the tragedy of the modern human, the impossibility of separating purity from sin. Contemporary criticism has profoundly revised the meaning of the sin. While in its own time it was interpreted as a moral warning about the dangers of lust, today it is seen as one of the first representations of woman as a subject of erotic power. From a feminist reading, the female figure is not the cause of sin but the owner of desire, the guardian of a forbidden knowledge that men fear. The serpent, far from being a symbol of evil, becomes a sign of ancestral wisdom, an echo of the myth of Lilith, the first rebellious woman who refused to submit to Adam. In this reinterpretation, Stuck's work reveals its irony. Sin is not the woman but the gaze that condemns her. The painter's technique contributes decisively to that ambiguity. Stuck uses a cool palette dominated by bluish tones, dark greens and metallic highlights, giving the body an almost sculptural texture. The shadows model the figure with academic precision, but the lateral light coming from an invisible source breaks that rigidity and wraps the body in a sensual atmosphere. There are no visible brushstrokes. Everything is polished to perfection, as if the body had been sculpted in alabaster. The result is hypnotic, an image that seems alive and dead at the same time, tangible and spectral, sacred and profane. Throughout the 20th century, the Sin became obligatory reference for artists and thinkers interested in eroticism, psychology, and symbolism. Its influence can be traced in German expressionist painting, in the cinema of the Weimar Republic, and in Freud's early reflections on sexual repression. The image of the woman with the serpent was reinterpreted by later generations as an emblem of dangerous attraction, of desire that destroys. However, few managed to reach Stuck's balance between mysticism and carnality, between myth and modernity. In his Munich home, Franz von Stuck organized his life like a ritual. He designed his furniture, his clothing, his architecture. Everything was arranged to construct the figure of the artist as a priest of beauty. In that context, the Sin was not a simple painting, but a relic. In his Künstleraltar, or artist's altar, he placed it on an illuminated pedestal, surrounded by columns and golden symbols. Whoever contemplated it could not avoid feeling that they were before a silent deity. Thus, Stuck transformed the act of looking into an act of worship, turning the aesthetics of Sin into a form of modern spirituality. As the decades passed, the painting suffered the ravages of time, the varnish darkened, and the surface lost part of its original transparency. Later restorations discovered that the artist had applied multiple layers of glazes, each thinner than the last, to achieve that effect of luminous skin that seems to breathe in the dark. By carefully cleaning the canvas, restorers revealed details that had remained hidden for almost a century. Green glints on the serpent's scales, amber gleams on the woman's lips, a subtle trace of the brush on the curve of the shoulder. The orange fire in the background recovered its original intensity, reminding the viewer that condemnation and beauty always burn together. The debate over the meaning of the sin continues to this day. Some critics consider it a deeply moralist work, a visual warning about the dangers of desire. Others see it as a celebration of sensuality, a vindication of women's freedom. But beyond interpretations, its power lies in the tension it generates. It offers not answers but questions. Who sins here, the woman, or the viewer who contemplates her? Where does art end and morality begin? Can an image be guilty of what it provokes? Stuck himself seemed to enjoy that ambiguity. In his diaries, he wrote a phrase that could sum up his artistic philosophy: "I do not paint what I see, I paint what looks at me." That inversion of the act of looking is the core of his work. In The Sin, the viewer does not observe with impunity. He feels observed by the serpent, judged by his desire. The painting thus becomes a moral mirror, where each person faces their own dark reflection. Franz von Stuck died in 1928, leaving a legacy that anticipated many of the obsessions of the 20th century: the psychology of desire, the aesthetics of evil, the confusion between the sacred and the erotic. Today, his Die Sünde continues to shine in the penumbra of museums, reminding us that sin is not a fact but a gaze, not an act but an idea. Contemplating it, one understands that true transgression is not in the woman's body, but in the unrestrained impulse that forces us to keep looking. In the silence of that black background, between the cold glow of the skin and the hidden fire of desire, Stuck's art continues to fulfill its oldest mission: to reveal what morality conceals, to show beauty in the forbidden, and to remind us that sometimes sin is simply another form of light. The legacy of The Sin grew with the 20th century, multiplying into echoes and reinterpretations. In the years following Stuck's death, his figure was reclaimed by very different movements. German expressionists admired his command of dark color and symbolic theatricality, while the surrealists found in his imagery of repressed desire and anticipation of their own obsessions. André Breton even cited him as one of the first painters capable of representing the unconscious before Freud gave it a name. That connection between eroticism and the subconscious turned The Sin into a psychoanalytic icon. The woman would be the object of repressed desire, the serpent, the instinct, and the darkness that envelops them, the collective unconscious in which both merge. What in 1893 had been religious scandal became in the 20th century a diagnosis of the modern mind. But there were also more critical readings. In the second half of the 20th century, the rise of feminist thought and gender studies radically transformed the interpretation of the painting. The woman in The Sin, who for decades was seen as a symbol of the temptation that drags man down, began to be understood as the victim of a patriarchal gaze that turns her into a myth to justify his guilt. In this reading, the female figure does not represent sin but the projection of male fear of the power of the female body and desire. The serpent then ceases to be an enemy and becomes an accomplice. It no longer bites, it protects. Both woman and serpent are a single consciousness that silently observes how the viewer reproduces Adam's ancestral gesture by blaming her for his own fascination. This shift in perspective returned to the painting a depth that transcends decorative eroticism and turns it into a mirror of the symbolic power that art exerts over gender myths. In recent exhibitions, museums have sought to restore that context. At Villa Stuck in Munich, the work is shown today as it was conceived, framed in gold, elevated on a pedestal, wrapped in ritual penumbra. The lighting gradually reveals the woman's silhouette until the visitor's gaze meets that of the serpent, and the entire room becomes a temple of contradictions. In Seattle, the Frye Art Museum decided to install its version of the painting at great height, recovering the sense of altar that Stuck originally planned. Thus, the public looks upward, as if before an archaic deity. What was once read as moral warning is now contemplated as total aesthetic experience. Sin turned into architecture, temptation turned into light. The materiality of the work has also been the object of study. Restorers have observed that Stuck applied layers of oil with almost alchemical discipline, thin glazes that allowed the lower pigments to show through and created an effect of translucent skin. That technique, together with the choice of a fine canvas and a dark ground, produces the illusion that the woman's body emits its own light from within. It is a glow that does not come from the sky or from infernal fire, but from the flesh itself. The serpent, painted with tones of cobalt and emerald green, has a metallic sheen that contrasts with the softness of human skin, underscoring the tension between the organic and the mineral, between life and petrification. Restoration in the 21st century, by removing yellowed varnishes, returned to the painting its original atmosphere, a mixture of lunar cold and subterranean fire, where purity and condemnation blur into a single temperature. The golden frame, also restored with archaeological precision, preserves inscriptions and reliefs designed by the artist himself. In them one recognizes ancient symbols, acanthus leaves, columns alluding to pagan temples, and a typeface inspired by the Latin inscriptions of Roman altars. None of this is casual. Stuck wanted to transform the painting into a new religion of the body. In the face of Christian morality that separated spirit from flesh, he erected an altar where both were reconciled in a single female figure. Thus, the sin does not preach guilt but revelation, the knowledge of desire as a vital force, the acceptance of the body as the temple of the sacred. During the years of the Nazi rise in Germany, Stuck's work was reinterpreted with suspicion. His exaltation of the body and his monumental aesthetics made him an uncomfortable artist, too erotic for the Aryan ideal, too spiritual for political realism. Some of his paintings were removed from public exhibitions, although never banned. However, his influence persisted in a subterranean way, especially in German cinematic imagery of the 1930s and 40s, where the contrast between light and shadow, purity and perdition, involuntarily repeats the lesson of the sin. After the war, critics rediscovered Stuck as a precursor of dark modernity, the artist who best portrayed the dangerous beauty of the human soul. Today, more than a century later, the painting still challenges closed interpretations. In the silence of the museum, the woman's figure seems to breathe, and the serpent maintains its hypnotic, eternal gaze. Whoever observes it cannot avoid feeling a mixture of attraction and shame, as if the sin were not in the painting, but in the very act of looking. That is Stuck's genius, to construct an image that does not represent desire but provokes it. In each viewer it awakens a different emotion: guilt, fascination, fear, pleasure, but all spring from the same deep place where the moral and the instinctive intertwine. If symbolist art sought to reveal the mysteries of the soul, the sin stands as its highest expression. It does not limit itself to illustrating a biblical myth. It reinvents it from within, with the language of the body and the darkness. In Stuck's female figure dwell the archetypes of Eve and Lilith, but also those of Venus, Persephone, and all the women deified and punished by history. She does not fall, she is not redeemed, she simply exists, suspended between good and evil. Her power lies in that ambiguity that makes her eternal. Franz von Stuck died in 1928, but his painting lives on because it embodies a truth that does not age. Sin is inseparable from beauty. All humanity is trapped in that duality. To look at the sin is to look at oneself, to recognize in the serpent's gleam the echo of our own desires, and in the shadow on the female face, the conscience that judges them. That is why the work remains disturbing, because it offers neither redemption nor condemnation, only a mirror. And in that mirror each viewer sees their own moral reflection trembling under the greenish-blue light of the mystery. Ultimately, Stuck's painting does not speak of religion or temptation, but of the power of the gaze. It reminds us that everything we consider sin is born from the desire to look at the forbidden. His Die Sünde is a portrait of the human eye before what it cannot possess, of the soul confronted with its own impulse. In that sense, Stuck did not paint a woman with a serpent. He painted the very structure of desire, the eternal instant in which attraction becomes knowledge. And that is why, more than 100 years later, his painting continues to shine as a warning and a promise. Sin has not died, it has only changed form. Now it lives in every gaze that before this painting feels the tremor of fascination and understands that the forbidden will always be the most luminous face of beauty.